poor mobile home park where dreams seemed out of reach, lived a 14-year-old boy named David. He didn't have shiny new running shoes or expensive sportswear like other athletes, but he possessed one thing that no one could ever take away from him: an exceptional ability to run. Every morning, when the sun barely peeked over the rundown roofs of the mobile home park, David would wake up ready for a long day of struggle. With his worn-out shoes, he ran through the streets delivering newspapers to earn a few extra coins before heading off to school to save time. His shoes, old and falling apart, couldn't stop his feet. Each step, though, his shoes were worn to the point of revealing the inner fabric, brought him a sense of freedom that nothing could replace. David lived with his father, and two younger siblings in a cramped room where the refrigerator hummed constantly due to a lack of food, and unpaid bills always sat in the drawer. His mother worked as a cleaner while his father worked the night shift at a gas station. They worked tirelessly, yet still couldn't make ends meet. Despite this, David never complained about their life, understanding that this was the fate his family had to accept. He never blamed anyone or whined. But inside David was a deep yearning for change, a dream to run faster and farther than anything his poverty-stricken life could offer. Running wasn't about competing with others. It was about running away from a life full of hardships in search of a better future for his family. Though no one had noticed his talent one day, someone did. That person was Coach Brooks, a former physical education instructor who had once been a long-distance runner. When he saw David race through the whole class with his ragged shoes, he saw the resilience and potential hidden within him. This was the moment that marked the beginning of a change in David's life. Coach Brooks realized that David wasn't just a runner. He could soar, but he needed an opportunity. He decided to help David, even though he knew it wouldn't be easy, given the many challenges David and his family faced. But what mattered was that Coach believed in David, and he was willing to do whatever it took to help him reach his dream. David never had the time to stop, not because he didn't want to, but because he knew that each day that passed brought more challenges for his family. His mother always said, "We live for family and for the things we love." But David didn't just want to live a makeshift life. He wanted to create a better future not just for himself but for his mother, father, and two younger siblings. Every morning after delivering newspapers, David would run home and prepare for a long day at school. Yet he never let these challenges discourage him. He still woke up earlier than all his classmates, always eager to work harder to achieve something different. However, he never shared his dreams with anyone. He quietly pursued each run, every class, and every night of studying under the dim light. Things began to change when Coach Brooks, the school's physical education teacher, noticed David's natural talent for running. During a gym class while others walked around the track, David sprinted like the wind, leaving everyone behind. His strides, though not perfect, were powerful and full of life. Coach Brooks couldn't help but notice this. He knew he couldn't let David, such a rare talent, run in silence without an opportunity. After the gym class, he approached David gently, asking, "Have you ever considered training seriously for track and field?" David looked at him and replied quietly, "I don't have time, Coach. I have to work after school." But Coach Brooks's eyes lit up, and he knew this wasn't a rejection. David just hadn't realized his own worth yet. Coach Brooks decided to help David. He took a pair of his old running shoes and handed them to David, knowing they weren't the best shoes, but they would certainly help David go farther than the worn-out shoes he was using. "These shoes aren't fancy, but they'll help you run longer than what you're using now," Coach said, his gaze filled with belief. David hesitated as he looked at the old shoes that Coach Brooks had worn during his own athlete days. He didn't know where those shoes would take him, but one thing was certain: he would run and never stop running until there was nothing left to lose. In the days that followed, David trained harder than ever before. Every evening after sorting goods at the grocery store, he would run to the old sports field behind the school, where there were no lights, only the faint moonlight illuminating the track. Under Coach Brooks' watchful eye, David ran with all his strength, persistently enough that the old shoes slowly wore out. But no matter how worn the shoes became, David still felt like he could fly. In those training sessions, David not only learned how to run faster, but also how to overcome his own limits. Each stride was not just a step forward, but a step further in his life, overcoming the hardships and pain he had experienced. Those moments when David threw himself into each training session with unwavering belief made Coach Brooks proud of his student. It wasn't because David could win races, but because he had learned to overcome life's challenges. That to Coach Brooks was the true victory. Life was never easy for David. He knew that every dream came at a cost, sweat, tears, and sometimes great sacrifices. The grueling training days became an inseparable part of David's life. He ran under dim streetlights in the cold night air, while other kids were playing and enjoying time with their families. His steps were never enough. His shoes were worn, his muscles ached, and at times David had to push himself beyond physical limits he never thought possible. Training seemed to never stop. He didn't just run on the school track. He ran on the streets, on the hills surrounding the city where he lived, places where no one saw, no one knew. No. Each time he ran, his heart would pound as a reminder, "You're doing this for the people you love. You can't give up." Sometimes David wondered if all this effort was worth it, if this dream would really help him and his family escape poverty. But no. Every time that thought crossed his mind, he would channel all his strength into the next step. In addition, financial difficulties were a constant struggle. David always felt the weight on his shoulders when he saw his mother working tirelessly and his father staying up late, working at the gas station to earn more for the family. Every time David came home, he would try to avoid looking at the unpaid bills or the mounting debts. He knew that unless something changed, his family would stay trapped in hardship forever. Meanwhile, at school, there was no shortage of mockery and doubt about his abilities. Children from wealthy families who had been trained from a young age always looked down on him. Some classmates mocked him, saying he was just a poor kid trying to compete in a race he'd never win. Bryce, a rich kid from the city center, still echoed in David's mind. "You'll never win. Don't bother dreaming." Those mocking words could easily hurt anyone. But David didn't let them discourage him. He knew that what he was chasing wasn't the admiration or attention of others. His goal was to create a different future for himself and his family, and no matter what anyone said, he would keep running. As the marathon race day approached, David, with his busy schedule, sometimes felt exhausted. He didn't have time to care for himself or rest properly. He had to spend every remaining moment training alone with no professional coach, no expensive equipment. All David had was an old pair of shoes, a worn-out stopwatch, and a heart full of determination. He didn't know what would happen when the race came, but he knew one thing: he would never stop, no matter how hard the challenges became. Each step, each breath, each drop of sweat falling to the ground was a reminder carved deep into his heart that he was fighting for something bigger than himself. Finally, the day David had worked so hard for had come. On that early morning, as the cold autumn wind blew through the streets of Birmingham, David's heart was filled with excitement and anxiety. This marathon was not just a regular race. It was the one and only chance for him to prove that he could break free from the shadow of a poor boy from the slums. It was his opportunity to fight not just for himself, but also for his family, for all the sacrifices they had made for him. As he stood among the crowd of runners, David felt like an outsider in a strange world. The athletes around him were all dressed in expensive running gear, designer sneakers, and modern gadgets to track their heart rate and breathing. Meanwhile, David was wearing an old hoodie, and his shoes were so worn that the rips were visible. Despite this, David did not feel intimidated. He didn't even glance at the wealthy athletes around him. He only focused on the road ahead, recalling the words of Mr. Brooks. "You don't need the world to notice, you just need to know that you gave everything you could." When the whistle blew, signaling the start of the race, a wave of runners surged forward like a tidal wave. David kept his pace, not rushing, not trying to follow anyone. He knew the race was much longer, and every step had to be carefully calculated. He let the others pass, allowing them to burn out too early. He observed, listened to his breathing, felt every step knowing that everything was going according to plan. Throughout the journey, David was not just an athlete participating in a competition. He was facing himself, confronting the struggles of life, and pushing past limits he once thought he could never overcome. Each step he took proved that his family's circumstances would not define his future. Each step was a declaration, I can do this, I will do this. As he passed the 16-mile mark, one of the runners ahead of him began to show signs of fatigue. It was Bryce, the mayor's son, wearing expensive running clothes and carrying an arrogant attitude. David noticed Bryce was gasping for air, his face turning red from exhaustion. He was falling behind. And that's when David started to pass him. His steps were not rushed, but each one was firm and full of determination. By the 22-mile mark, David had moved up to second place. Only one person remained ahead of him, Madison Carlisle, the girl who was considered to be the potential winner. She was running steadily, her stride perfect. But David realized that his patience and determination were closing the gap. At mile 23, David saw Madison falter. She grabbed her left arm and suddenly collapsed, falling to the ground. Without hesitation, David immediately turned back. He knew that his victory wasn't about being first. What mattered more was helping someone else when they needed it most. He ran toward her, finding her on the ground, gasping for air, her face pale from exhaustion. He stopped without overthinking, knowing he had to help her. A medical staff member nearby saw Madison in critical condition and urgently called for help. She's severely dehydrated. She needs to be taken to the hospital immediately, he said. But when he looked around, he realized that there was no one else but David and himself to assist. David said nothing, simply bent down, picked Madison up and began running back toward the medical station. Each step now felt harder than ever before. His legs were heavy, his muscles stiff, but nothing could stop him from running. The pain threatened to bring him to the ground, but he didn't stop. With each step, he thought of his family, of the reason he started this race. He wasn't just running for himself, but for the people he loved. He couldn't give up. With each steady step, he knew he was overcoming a challenge greater than anything he had faced in his life. And when he finally brought Madison to safety, no one saw. There were no applause, no accolades, only silence, only the satisfaction of knowing that he had done the right thing. Although he didn't win the race, David knew that he had won over himself. 2 days after the marathon ended, David couldn't have imagined that his life was about to take such a big turn as he was helping his mother with housework in their small rented room. The atmosphere in the house was the same as always, poor lacking, but warm and full of love. Suddenly, a black Cadillac appeared in front of their house. It was a car that David never imagined would appear in this neighborhood. His mother opened the door, and a man in a gray suit along with a young woman got out of the car. David stood still, astonished to see Madison, the girl he had saved in the race, stepping out of the luxurious car. But what shocked him even more was the man next to her. He seemed like an important person with a stern face and eyes full of authority. He walked toward David, his deep voice resonating with power. "You're David, right?" David didn't know how to answer. He nodded awkwardly. Madison smiled gently. "Thank you, David. You saved my life. If it weren't for you, I don't think I'd have survived." Her words left David feeling confused and not understanding what was happening. Everything was so sudden, so unexpected for a boy who was only used to a life of hardship. The man in the suit continued. "I'm Mr. Carlisle, Madison's father. She told me everything about what you did in the race, the sacrifice you made to save her. I don't believe in charity, but I do believe in honesty and character, and I want to offer you an opportunity." David looked at him, not understanding, but as Mr. Carlisle continued, David realized that what was coming next would change his entire life. "I want to offer you a full sports scholarship at a training facility I sponsor. This isn't just about racing, it's about building leaders. I also have job opportunities at my companies. I want to help your family not with charity money, but by creating real opportunities." David couldn't believe his ears. He turned to look at his mother, seeing her wide-eyed with shock, and even his father, who was always silent, couldn't hide his emotion. But what stunned David even more were Mr. Carroll's words. "With your talent and character, I want you to join the youth sports club I'm supporting. This will not only be about winning competitions, but about helping people like you, people who can make a real difference in society." David couldn't say a word, standing there wide-eyed looking at the opportunities life was offering him. He didn't understand how someone could be so generous to a poor boy from the slums. But one thing was certain. David knew his life would never be the same again. It was a turning point, an opportunity he had been waiting for his whole life. But before they left, David turned and looked at Mr. Brooks, the teacher who had always believed in and encouraged him. "If I go, he goes with me," David said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "He's the reason I've come this far." Mr. Carroll looked at Mr. Brooks and nodded. "I always need people who can see things the right way. He will be invited to be a senior advisor to the club." And so everything changed. Not because David ran the fastest, not because he came in first place, but because he did what he felt was right when no one was watching. He chose to stop. And that was the turning point. No one expected David's life changed rapidly after that day. He began training at a professional sports facility equipped with coaches, nutritionists, and modern equipment he had once only dared to dream about. New running shoes, modern athletic gear, and training sessions under the guidance of experts made David feel like he was living in a dream. But what was even more special was the dedication of Mr. Brooks, who was always there supporting and believing in him from the very first day. However, the greatest change in David's life wasn't just from being professionally trained. It was the change in how he saw himself. He was no longer the poor boy from the slums, the one society overlooked. He was part of a team, a community, where he was respected for his efforts and character. And for David, this was more important than any medal or title. Every day when stepping onto the track, David didn't just run for himself, but for his family, for the people who had helped him along the way. It was his mother's sacrifices, his father's hard work, and the persistent encouragement of Mr. Brooks. Every morning when he tied his shoes and prepared to go out, he didn't just look at the solid wall of the goals he had achieved, but also at the things he had yet to achieve. The dream of helping his family, the dream of changing the lives of others. After some time, David participated in major competitions where athletes from renowned schools and professional training teams competed. Each time he beat an opponent, it wasn't just about speed, but about the belief he had carried throughout the journey. He remembered the times he was mocked by friends for his worn-out shoes, the cold days when he ran under the dim streetlights, and now all those efforts had borne fruit. But the price of change wasn't always easy, even though things had gotten better. David could never forget the tough moments. When he crossed the finish line, there were no cheers. No one called his name. He was still the boy from the slums, still without any notable titles. But what he had was the respect and trust of the people who truly mattered. Mr. Brooks had always stood behind him, not just as a coach, but as a companion who helped David realize that in sports, as in life, what matters is not who you beat, but that you never give up. Then one day when David was sitting next to Mr. Brooks, after a strenuous training session, he said, "You know, David, the most important thing is that no matter how life changes, what you did in that race will be the most beautiful story I've ever witnessed. You did the right thing when no one was looking." And in the end, David realized that what he had truly won wasn't the race. It was himself. 2 days after the marathon, David couldn't have imagined that his life would take such a dramatic turn. One morning, after finishing his training session, David was helping his mother with the housework in their small room. The atmosphere in the house was as usual, poor lacking, but warm and full of love. Suddenly, a black Cadillac appeared in front of their house. This was a car that David never imagined would appear in their neighborhood. His mother opened the door, and a man in a gray suit, along with a young woman, stepped out of the car. David stood motionless, surprised to see Madison, the girl he had saved during the marathon, step out of the luxurious car. But what shocked him even more was the man beside her. He appeared to be someone very important, with a stern face and an air of authority. He walked toward David, His deep, confident voice echoed as he said, "Are you, David?" David didn't know how to respond, so he nodded awkwardly. Madison smiled gently. "Thank you, David. You saved my life. If it weren't for you, I don't think I would have survived." Her words made David feel confused and unsure of what was happening. Everything was so sudden, so unexpected for a boy who was used to living in hardship. The man in the suit continued, "I'm Mr. Carroll Madison's father. She told me everything about what you did in the race, about the sacrifices you made to save her. I don't believe in charity, but I believe in honesty and character, and I want to offer you an opportunity." David looked at him in disbelief, but when Mr. Carril continued, he began to realize that what was coming next would change his life forever. "I want to offer you a full sports scholarship at a training facility that I sponsor. This is not just about running, it's about building real leaders. I also have a few job opportunities in my companies. I want to help your family not with charity money, but by creating real opportunities." David couldn't believe his ears. He looked at his mother, who had wide eyes in surprise, and even his father, who was always silent, couldn't hide his emotion. But what truly stunned David was Mr. Carrill's words. "With your talent and character, I want you to join the youth sports club I'm helping. This is not just to win competitions, but to help people like you, people who can make real changes in society." David couldn't say anything. He just stood there, his eyes wide open, looking at the opportunities that life had just laid before him. He didn't understand why someone would be so generous to a poor boy from the slums. But one thing was certain. David knew that his life would never be the same again. It was a turning point, an opportunity he had waited for his entire life. But before they left, David turned to Mr. Brooks, the teacher who had always believed in and encouraged him. "If I go, he goes with me," David said loudly enough for everyone to hear. "He's the reason I've come this far." Mr. Carroll looked at Mr. Brooks and nodded. "I always need people who can recognize the right things. He will be invited to serve as a senior advisor for the club." And just like that, everything changed. Not because David ran the fastest, not because he won the race, but because he did what he felt was right when no one was watching. He chose to stop, and that choice opened a new door to his future. With all the new opportunities in hand, David began to step into a new chapter of his life. After joining the special sports club, he not only improved his running skills, but also learned valuable lessons about patience, determination, and the importance of maintaining goals, even when facing major challenges. Every day of training, David felt he was getting closer to his dreams. He wasn't just running for himself, but also for his family, the ones who had always supported and believed in him during the hard years. He also never forgot about kids like him, those living in difficult and impoverished conditions, but still nurturing hope and striving to rise above. With the support of Mr. Carril and the club, David began to participate in major competitions, and each time he hit the track, he felt more confident and stronger. He wasn't just running to win, he was running to prove that courage and perseverance could break through any barriers. But what made David the proudest was the change in the way the community saw him. No longer the poor boy with old shoes, David had now become a symbol of persistence and belief in oneself. His story inspired so many, especially those who were in similar circumstances as he once was, to show that no matter how harsh life might be, if one holds on to faith and continues striving, opportunities will come. 1 year later, David returned to his old school not as a student but as a volunteer coach. He spent time teaching the kids about sports perseverance and, most importantly, how to believe in their own abilities. He wanted to share with them the lessons he had learned so that they could see that no matter the challenges, they could change their lives. And in one training session, as he watched a child running on the track, David suddenly recalled his own hard times. He remembered the worn-out shoes, the cold mornings when he had to run through the wind and rain. But it was these very memories that had shaped the strong, determined David he was today. At that moment, he realized that it wasn't just a story about running or achieving success, but a story about life's journey, about determination, about taking steps that never stop. no matter how tough life gets. David had become an inspiration, and his story wasn't just about victories, but about a meaningful journey that he had traveled. He had learned that in life, sometimes what's most important isn't achieving glory, but leaving a mark, a legacy that can change someone else's life. With the continuation of this story, David had not only transformed his own life, but also changed the lives of those around him, helping them realize that anyone can rise no matter where they start from.